Imagine you're sitting quietly in your room. You close your eyes. You can still picture your friends, recall your memories, imagine places you've never been, and even feel emotions that have no physical cause in that moment. Now here's the strange question. Where is all of that happening? Where does your mind actually exist? Not your brain, not the gray, folded tissue inside your skull, but the thing that experiences, the thing that thinks, feels, remembers, imagines, and wonders about itself. Richard Feynman once said that the easiest person to fool is yourself. And perhaps nowhere is that more true than when we try to understand our own minds. We assume that because we are our minds, we must know how they work. But the more science looks into it, the more mysterious it becomes. Neuroscience tells us the mind comes from the brain. Billions of neurons firing, passing electrical and chemical signals, creating patterns we call thoughts. That sounds simple enough, until you actually ask where, in all of that activity, is the experience. You can measure a neuron firing when you see the color red, but where is the redness? Where in that network is the taste of chocolate, or the feeling of love, or the sound of music? We can describe what the brain does, but not what it feels like to be it. That gap between function and experience is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. Feynman loved to take apart problems like this, to strip away fancy words and see what's really going on. So let's think the way he might. Suppose I take your brain and copy it atom by atom, perfectly. I put that copy in a different body. It wakes up and says, I'm you. It remembers your past, feels your emotions, even continues your unfinished thoughts. The question is it you? If you could somehow look at both versions, one original, one copy, which one would have your consciousness? Or would both? If both, then what does it mean to be you? Feynman would probably grin and say, that's interesting, but you can't just say words. You have to make them mean something. So let's test it with a thought experiment. When you dream, your mind creates entire worlds, sounds, faces, feelings, all without any sensory input. While dreaming, you're convinced it's real. You might feel fear, excitement, or confusion. Yet all of it is happening in your brain. So when you wake up, what's different? The brain is still producing experiences, but now we call it reality. The difference, it seems, is not the content of the experience, but whether it corresponds to something outside. But from your mind's point of view, both are experiences. So again, where does the mind exist? Some scientists argue it's entirely within the brain, a product of neurons communicating through electrochemical signals. But others, including some quantum physicists and philosophers, have begun to ask if consciousness might not be a byproduct of the physical world, but a fundamental feature of it. Just like space, time, and energy. Maybe consciousness is something that can't be reduced any further. Maybe it's not something the brain produces, but something it tunes into. Like a radio, the brain might be a receiver for consciousness, not the source. This idea might sound strange, but it arises because every scientific explanation we have for consciousness so far ends up describing mechanisms, not experience. You can explain how neurons interact, but that doesn't tell you why there's something it feels like to be a human, rather than nothing at all. Feynman himself was deeply skeptical of easy answers. He once said, "You can know the name of a bird in all the languages of the world, but when you're done, you still know nothing about the bird." In the same way, we can label all the parts of the brain, map its circuits, and still have no clue where the you that's experiencing this right now actually is. Let's try a different analogy. Imagine you're watching a movie on a screen. You see people running, cars moving, colors flashing. But if you get up close to the screen, there are only tiny dots of light. No motion, no sound, just flickering pixels. The mind is like the movie, and the brain is like the pixels. The movie exists only as a pattern in those lights. Yet the story you perceive, the emotion you feel, doesn't exist in the pixels themselves. It exists in how your brain interprets them. So is the story on the screen or your mind. The answer is both and neither. It's something that emerges from the relationship between them. We can record every neuron that fires when you hear your favorite song. We can even predict what emotion you'll feel. But the feeling itself, the joy, nostalgia, or sadness, can't be found in the recording. It exists only to you. That's the core of the mystery. Consciousness is both private and universal. Every conscious being has it, but no one can access another's directly. Humans struggle to explain this because we are using the very thing we're trying to understand, our minds, to study the mind. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. Science demands observation from the outside, but consciousness only exists from the inside. That mismatch might be why no scientific theory so far has fully captured what consciousness is. Feynman often said that the universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it's stranger than we can imagine. Consciousness may be an example of that. Maybe the mind isn't the brain in a simple way. Maybe it's part of a deeper level of reality, one that links information, matter, and experience in a way we can't yet grasp. Some researchers explore this through quantum theory, others through information theory, suggesting that the universe itself might be made of information, and consciousness is how information feels from the inside. Think about that for a second. Everything you've ever experienced, every color, sound, memory, or dream has happened inside your consciousness. You've never actually seen the world directly. What you see is a reconstruction your brain creates from electrical signals. The red of a sunset, the blue of the sky, those colors don't exist in the world, they exist in your mind. The universe itself, as far as we know, is colorless, silent, and without smell. The mind paints it with experience. So maybe the question, where does your mind exist, is the wrong one. Maybe your mind isn't in the universe. Maybe the universe is in your mind. Everything you've ever known, every scientific discovery, every moment of joy or grief, has appeared inside this strange, subjective space we call awareness. Feynman would probably remind us not to jump to mystical conclusions. He'd say, it's okay not to know. Admitting ignorance is the beginning of real science. The mind may be the last great mystery we face, not because it's beyond science, but because it forces us to rethink what science is. If every observation depends on a conscious observer, then maybe understanding consciousness isn't just another problem, it's the foundation of understanding itself. In the end, Feynman's disturbing discovery wasn't that the mind is mysterious, but that it might be the mystery, the lens through which all others are seen. You can map every atom in the brain, yet still not find the place where your first love lives or where your childhood memories hide. The mind is not a thing, it's a process, a pattern, a dance of experience and matter so intimate that one gives meaning to the other. So next time you close your eyes, remember the entire universe you know is being created in that darkness, by you, within you, as you. And maybe, just maybe, that's where your mind truly exists, not in any one place, but in the act of being aware at all. Maybe the mind isn't located anywhere because it isn't a thing. It's a process, a relationship between information, perception, and awareness. The brain provides structure, but consciousness provides meaning. Without it, atoms are just motion. With it, there is beauty, curiosity, love, fear, and understanding. Feynman might say, it's perfectly fine not to know. Because not knowing doesn't mean the question is meaningless, it means it's alive. And that's what drives science forward. The mystery of the mind might never be solved, but exploring it reshapes how we see reality. It reminds us that science isn't just about equations, it's about the wonder of existence itself. So when you close your eyes tonight, remember, everything you've ever seen, every person you've ever loved, every thought you've ever had exists within this silent, invisible space of awareness. Maybe that's where your mind truly is, not in your brain, not in your body, but in the simple, miraculous fact that you are aware at all. And that realization might just be Feynman's most beautiful discovery of all. Imagine sitting quietly in your room. You close your eyes and begin to think. You can recall the face of a friend, the sound of their laughter, or the scent of rain on the street after a storm. None of those things are physically in front of you, yet you can bring them vividly into existence within your mind. You can imagine new worlds, replay old memories, and even construct experiences that never happened. But where exactly is all that happening? Where does your mind actually exist? Not your brain, the physical organ made of cells and electricity, but the conscious experience that lives behind your eyes, the you, that is aware of being you. Richard Feynman loved questions like this. He had a way of taking something everyone assumes they understand and twisting it slightly until the ground beneath your thoughts disappears. The question of where the mind exists seems simple, but it quickly unravels the fabric of what we mean by existence itself. You can point to your head and say, "My mind is in my brain." But what does that really mean? If someone opened up your skull, all they would find are neurons, billions of tiny cells, passing electrical and chemical signals in complex patterns. Nowhere in that biological machinery could they point and say, "There, that's a thought. That's a feeling. That's the awareness of being alive." Science can describe what the brain does, but not what it feels like to be the brain doing it. If you look at the brain of someone seeing the color red, you can identify the specific regions that light up. You can record the neural activity, and you can even reproduce the same signals in an experiment. But where in that firing of neurons is the experience of red? The redness itself, the vibrant subjective sensation, is nowhere to be found in the data. You can study pain, trace it through the nervous system, and describe every pathway it follows. Yet the feeling of pain, the inner ouch, that hurts, cannot be captured by any measurement. This gap between what the brain does and what the mind experiences is one of the deepest mysteries in science. Philosophers call it the hard problem of consciousness. It asks, how can matter, atoms, molecules, neurons, give rise to the first-person experience of being alive? How can the physical produce the mental? For centuries, humans have tried to explain this by separating body and soul, or by assuming that consciousness somehow floats apart from the physical world. But modern science insists that everything, including the mind, must obey the laws of physics. And yet, when we look closely, the laws of physics describe motion, energy, and information, never awareness. Feynman might remind us that knowing how something works doesn't mean we understand it. We can trace the path of a lightning bolt, but that doesn't mean we know what it feels like to be lightning. Likewise, we can map every circuit in the brain, but that doesn't tell us what it feels like to think, to hope, to love, or to dream. Consciousness doesn't show up in our equations, but without it, none of those equations would even be noticed or written. Perhaps this is what fascinated Feynman the most, the realization that science itself depends on consciousness. Every observation, every experiment, every insight is filtered through the mind. Without the mind, there is no science, no knowledge, no experience at all. And yet the mind, the very thing that makes understanding possible, remains the most elusive thing we've ever tried to understand. It is both the tool and the mystery, the question and the questioner. So the simple act of sitting quietly and noticing your thoughts becomes something extraordinary. The fact that you can be aware of being aware, this self-reflective spark, is perhaps the most remarkable phenomenon in the universe. It's the point where physics meets experience, where matter wakes up and begins to wonder about itself. That's where the question, where does your mind exist, truly begins, not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a doorway into the deepest mystery of what it means to be alive. Let's explore this question the way Richard Feynman would have, by breaking it down with a simple but unsettling experiment of thought. Imagine that science has advanced so far that we can make a perfect copy of your brain, atom by atom. Every neuron, every connection, every memory, every thought pattern duplicated exactly. The copy wakes up in another body and immediately says, "I'm you." It remembers your childhood, your fears, your secrets, and even the exact moment before the copying happened. From its perspective, it is the continuation of your life. But now there are two of you, the original and the copy. Which one has the real you? Where does your consciousness exist? This question exposes a deep hole in our understanding. If consciousness is purely a result of brain activity, then copying the brain should copy the mind. But that leads to strange consequences. If both versions think they are you, then does consciousness divide or duplicate? If it divides, what does that mean for your sense of being one continuous self? If it duplicates, then what makes one version more real than the other? We start to see how fragile the idea of identity becomes once we treat the mind as a pattern instead of a thing. Neuroscience tells us the brain creates consciousness through billions of neurons firing in complex networks. This explanation is powerful, but it only describes the machinery, not the mystery. A computer can process information too. Yet, when your computer runs a simulation of pain, it doesn't feel pain. When it displays a sunset, it doesn't see colors. When it processes a melody, it doesn't hear music. Somewhere between information and experience, something happens that science hasn't yet explained. Something transforms mere computation into awareness. To see how strange this really is, consider your dreams. When you dream, your brain is cut off from most sensory input. Your eyes are closed, your body lies still, yet your mind constructs entire worlds. You can see, hear, move, and even feel emotions just as vividly as when you're awake. In that moment, your dream world is reality to you. The only difference between dreaming and waking is that one corresponds to external signals, while the other does not. But from your mind's perspective, both are experiences. This means your mind doesn't need the outside world to create reality. It can do it internally. Every sight, sound, and touch you've ever known is recreated within the brain. So even in waking life, what you perceive as the world is actually a mental model, an interpretation your brain constructs from electrical signals. You never directly touch the real world, you touch a reconstruction of it. Feynman might have said that understanding must come from looking at what we can actually observe. And what we can observe is that consciousness appears to be both a product of the brain and yet something the brain itself cannot fully explain. It's like a mirror that reflects everything but cannot see itself. When you look for the exact point where physical processes turn into subjective experience, it vanishes, like trying to find the place where a rainbow touches the ground. The copy thought experiment shows us that the self, the feeling of I, isn't made of material substance. It's made of continuity, memory, and awareness. When those patterns are interrupted or duplicated, our sense of identity loses its anchor. We realize that consciousness might not be tied to one body or brain, but to the structure and flow of experience itself. Feynman would likely smile at how uncomfortable that makes us. He would remind us that the first step in learning is to admit our ignorance. And in this case, what we don't know might be more profound than anything we've ever discovered. The brain is a map of atoms and chemistry, but the mind is the territory of experience, and we still don't know how the two are connected. Science depends on observation, on the ability to look at something from the outside and measure it. But consciousness refuses to be observed that way. It exists only from the inside. You can record brain activity, you can trace the movement of signals through neurons, but you can never step outside your own awareness to look at it directly. Every time you try to study it, you are using the very thing you are trying to understand. It is like a flashlight trying to shine light on itself, or an eye trying to see itself without a mirror. This is what makes the study of the mind unlike any other field in science. When physicists study atoms, they can build instruments to observe them. When biologists study cells, they can look through a microscope. But when we study consciousness, all we have is the experience itself. You can't take consciousness out of a person, put it on a table, and examine it. You can only ever be it. This is a problem science has never truly solved. How do you study something that you can't observe from the outside? Scientists can scan the brain while a person is thinking, feeling, or dreaming. They can map which regions activate when someone sees color, remembers a song, or feels pain. But none of those measurements show the actual experience. They show correlations, not causes. They reveal activity, not awareness. You can see when neurons fire, but you cannot see why that firing feels like joy or sorrow. The inner world remains invisible to every instrument we've ever built. Richard Feynman believed that to understand something, you have to be able to recreate it. What I cannot create, I do not understand. That was his rule. By that measure, we don't yet understand consciousness. We can build machines that calculate faster than us, translate languages, even mimic emotions, but none of them are aware of what they're doing. They process input and produce output, but there's no inner experience. A machine might simulate fear, but it doesn't feel fear. It might describe happiness, but it doesn't know happiness. The gap between intelligence and consciousness is enormous, and we don't know how to bridge it. Some thinkers have suggested that consciousness might not be an emergent property of the brain at all. It might be a basic feature of the universe, just like space, time, or energy. Maybe the brain doesn't generate consciousness, it interacts with it. Think of a radio. The music isn't inside the radio, it's in the signal it receives. The radio just tunes into it, interprets it, and plays it out loud. The brain could work in a similar way, acting as a receiver or a filter for consciousness that already exists in the fabric of reality. That idea might sound strange, but it offers a way to think about why consciousness feels both deeply personal and yet universal. Every conscious being has a different experience, yet the very capacity for experience seems to be the same in all of us. Whether you are human or animal, young or old, the awareness that says, "I exist," feels identical in its essence. The problem is that this kind of awareness cannot be captured by our scientific tools. We can measure the brain's patterns, but not the awareness that perceives them. We can't separate the observer from the observed. Consciousness is both the subject and the instrument of inquiry. The more we try to study it, the more it slips away, because we are looking for something that isn't an object at all. It's the condition that allows anything to appear as an object in the first place. Feynman might say that this is not a failure of science, but a reminder of its boundaries. Science is about describing relationships between measurable things, but consciousness may not be a thing. It might be the stage upon which all things appear. The mind is not another object in the universe. It is the universe seen from within. That's why every attempt to pin it down feels like chasing your own reflection. You can see its effects everywhere, but the source always hides just behind your gaze. Everything you have ever experienced, every sight, sound, taste, and thought has happened inside consciousness. You have never actually touched the external world directly. What you call seeing, hearing, or touching is your brain's interpretation of electrical signals. When light enters your eyes, it triggers chemical reactions that send impulses through your optic nerve. Your brain decodes these signals and creates the image you perceive as reality. But that image isn't out there in the world. It is a reconstruction inside your mind. The same is true for every sense. When you touch something warm, it's not the warmth itself that reaches your consciousness. It's the pattern of signals your nerves send, which your brain translates into the experience of heat. When you look at a red apple, there is no redness in the apple itself. Light waves bounce off its surface. Some of those waves enter your eyes, and your brain interprets them as a color. The apple has no idea it's red. Red exists only in the mind of the observer. The same goes for every sound you hear. The vibration of air molecules is turned into electrical patterns that your brain perceives as music, speech, or noise. The world outside is a vast sea of energy and matter, but the world inside, the one you experience, is made of perceptions, sensations, and meanings. Physics tells us the external universe is silent, colorless, and odorless. Molecules do not smell sweet or sour. Atoms do not make sound. The universe is a field of waves, particles, and forces, but the human mind transforms it into a living experience. That transformation is so seamless that we forget it's happening. We think we are perceiving the world directly, but we are actually experiencing our brain's interpretation of it. The mind, in this sense, acts as a kind of painter, coloring the universe with sensations that make it meaningful. This realization changes everything about how we think of reality. If all perception happens within consciousness, then in a profound sense, the world you know exists within you. Every mountain, every tree, every person you've ever met, all of it appears as part of the mental landscape constructed by your mind. This doesn't mean the external world isn't real, but it does mean that what you experience of it is always filtered, shaped, and limited by your consciousness. Feynman might have compared this to looking at the night sky. When you gaze at the stars, you are not seeing them as they are now. You're seeing light that has traveled for thousands or even millions of years. You are always looking into the past, interpreting signals that have already changed. The same is true for your everyday perceptions. You are never directly connected to the world. You are always a few steps removed, interpreting data through the lens of the mind. That idea raises an even deeper question. If everything you perceive exists as experience within consciousness, can you say for certain that anything exists outside of it? The only evidence you have for the external world is what appears in awareness. Even the concept of a physical universe comes to you as a thought, an idea within consciousness. It's possible that the relationship between the mind and the universe isn't one of separation at all. Maybe the two are intertwined, different aspects of the same underlying reality. In that view, consciousness and matter are not separate entities. They are like the inside and outside of a single surface. You can't have one without the other. The universe expresses itself as physical patterns, and those patterns are experienced internally as mind. Each complements the other. Without consciousness, there is no experienced universe. Without the universe, there is nothing for consciousness to be aware of. Perhaps this is why awareness feels so fundamental. It is not something that happens inside the brain. It is the field in which both brain and world appear. It is the quiet backdrop against which thoughts, sensations, and experiences rise and fall, and everything you've ever known has existed within that silent, boundless space of awareness. The external universe gives form to it, but the mind gives it meaning. Reality, then, might not be something you live in, but something that lives through you. In the end, Richard Feynman's most unsettling realization about the mind wasn't just that it's mysterious. It's that consciousness might be the foundation of everything we call mystery. Every scientific observation, every mathematical idea, every discovery about the universe arises only because a conscious mind observes it. Without the observer, there would be no science, no beauty, no meaning. Yet the observer, the mind itself, remains the one thing we cannot fully explain. It is as if the universe built a mirror that can look back at itself, and that mirror is us. We can explain the structure of galaxies, the behavior of atoms, even the formation of life, but when we turn inward and ask, who is it that's aware of all this? The answer dissolves. Consciousness has no weight, no color, no measurable boundary, yet it is the most undeniable thing there is. You can doubt the external world. You can doubt your memories, but you cannot doubt that you are aware. Awareness is the ground on which everything else stands, the canvas on which reality paints its picture. If consciousness is not a thing but a process, then it cannot be located anywhere. It isn't inside the brain in the same way water is inside a glass. It is more like a relationship, a dynamic flow between information, perception, and awareness. The brain provides the structure, the biological hardware that allows the process to unfold, but consciousness is the experience that emerges when the system observes itself. The brain might produce the symphony of neural activity, but consciousness is the music that the symphony creates. That means the mind may not be a separate entity, trapped inside the skull, but rather a phenomenon that exists at the intersection of matter and meaning. The physical brain provides the rhythm, consciousness provides the melody. Together they form the song of existence, the ongoing experience of being alive. When that song stops, the music disappears, but the potential for it remains, just as silence holds the possibility of sound. Feynman always valued the honesty of not knowing. He would remind us that uncertainty isn't a weakness, but a doorway to discovery. Admitting that we don't understand consciousness doesn't mean we should stop searching. It means we're finally asking the right questions. The fact that we can't yet explain how awareness arises might be a clue that our current way of thinking, dividing the world into subject and object, observer and observed, might itself be incomplete. Perhaps the mind and the universe are not two separate things at all, but two perspectives of one reality. From the outside, it appears as matter and energy, following physical laws. From the inside, it appears as thoughts, emotions, and awareness. The universe observing itself through countless conscious beings, each a different window through which existence experiences its own unfolding. Consciousness, then, could be the universe becoming aware of itself. When we see it that way, the mystery of the mind transforms from a scientific puzzle into a profound reflection of what we are. We are not separate observers of the universe. We are part of it, made of the same atoms that shine in stars, yet capable of wondering what those stars mean. The boundary between inner and outer, mind and matter, begins to blur. Reality is no longer something happening out there. It is something happening within awareness, shaped by perception and understanding. To recognize this is not to solve the mystery, but to appreciate its depth. The mind is not just another problem for science to conquer. It is the space in which science, art, love, and meaning all arise. It is both the question and the means of questioning. And maybe that's what Feynman understood best, that the beauty of knowing lies not in final answers, but in the infinite curiosity that keeps us searching. When you close your eyes and feel yourself thinking, sensing, or simply existing, remember that everything you've ever known, every color, every sound, every person, every idea lies within that field of awareness. Perhaps your mind doesn't exist inside your body. Perhaps your body, your memories, and the entire universe exist inside your mind. And in that realization, the mystery of consciousness becomes not something to solve, but something to stand in awe of, the quiet miracle that makes the universe aware of itself.